Welcome to Under the Rug at Work, where we shine light on things that are normally swept under the rug. I'm your host, Nicole Turnbull, and today I'm chatting with Edwards about workplace happiness. Now, Declan is the founder of BU Happiness College, a TEDx speaker, and that happiness guy. Declan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
How did you get the title, that happiness guy?
Yeah, look, it's a funny one. I think it's a case of lean into what the world gives you. This was a couple years ago now. I was showing up to a lot of networking events, speaking at a few conferences, sharing some of the research and work I was doing in the positive psychology and happiness space.
Mhm.
And there was a few events in a row. I remember a few months in a row where I was going to events and I was talking to people and sort of mid conversation, they were like, wait, I think I know you and I know your work. I think I've either seen you at a conference a year ago or I've seen your work on LinkedIn. Aren't you that happiness guy? Like you're that guy who talks about happiness a lot. And I remember joking with, at the time, our head of storytelling at BU Happiness College. So he was responsible for a lot of our marketing strategy, a lot of our social media strategy. Basically, how do we tell the story of what BU Happiness College is? And I said, all these people are not remembering my name. They're not remembering the company's name. They're just remembering that happiness guy. And he went, it's kind of catchy. Let's run with it. And so I updated the name on LinkedIn, updated the socials. And, to this day, I'll talk to people and they may not remember, Declan Edwards. There's probably people who are going to listen to this now and may not remember Declan Edwards from this podcast. But there'll be some point down the line where our paths cross again. And they'll be like, wait, I listened to a podcast that spoke to this guy about happiness at work. Are you that happiness guy? I'll be like, yes, yes, I am. So that's how I got the moniker, I guess, the name of that happiness guy.
You know what? I think I might have said it as well. I'm like, your face is really familiar. We are in the same kind of location. But yeah, you do. You talk about that happiness stuff. And look, can we talk about, I just saw your arm as well. I think you've got the BU happiness logo on there.
I do, I
Can
do.
you?
I've got the BU leaves. So our logo, we've got three leaves representing growth and representing the fact that growth is something that takes time. It's nurtured to. I believe happiness is like a skill, it's like a garden. It's not something that, just comes and we have it for life. We need to tend to it. We need to take care of it. It's a consistent practice. So when we designed the logo for the Happiness College, we had the three leaves growing in size. And that was another thing that life kind of threw my way. This was many years ago now. I'm talking probably 7 years ago, very early in BU Happiness College. I was young and eager to prove our worth and to succeed as an entrepreneur and all that fun stuff. And I went to this event and someone said, you've created a movement that people believe in when someone's willing to have the logo tattooed on them. And I went, what do you mean? He goes, well, think about it. Like Harley Davidson's the classic example. The amount of people with the Harley Davidson logo tattooed on them is quite wild. And he went, you've really made it when someone gets it tattooed. And I remember at the time saying kind of offhand and jokingly, I was like, I'll get it tattooed on me the day someone else asks if they can have it tattooed on them. Even if they don't go through with it, if someone goes, hey, I believe enough in this that I would get it tattooed,
Mhm.
that's the universe saying to me, put your money where your mouth is. If you say you massively believe in this happiness movement and the skills and science of happiness, would you have it tattooed on yourself? And at the time, I think I only had one other little tattoo on my wrist. And a few years go by, and one of our members who has lots of tattoos, like tattoo sleeves, and was like, hey, would it be weird if I got a little, three leaves growing in size, a little BU logo, just a small one somewhere on my tattoo sleeve? And I went, look, you can if you want, but also I'm going to do it too. And so, true to my word, followed through. And it's funny because I forget it's there, it's on the inside of my arm. And most of the time when I'm presenting, I'm wearing long sleeves and people don't notice. And this is probably the first
Yeah.
time you've noticed it. It's,
Yeah.
short sleeve weather today. But there'll be times when I'm speaking and I might have a branded polo shirt on or something. And
Mm.
it's so painstakingly obvious because the branded logo on the shirt sits right next to where it is on my arm. So it's very clear that they're like, whoa, this guy tattooed his logo on him.
I love that though, and it makes so much sense. Like I relate to that completely, and also with the growth and development. Like you can't force someone to be happy. You can't force someone to grow. You can't force anything in family or in life. And that's so true when it comes to plants as well. Like you've seen those experiments where you yell or talk down to plants and they don't grow. And, uplifting and having that positivity does exactly the opposite. So I think in so many ways that's so aligned.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest, that's what I've come to realize my role is in a lot of ways in my career. A lot of my career is spent doing happiness research and sharing the skills and science of happiness with people. But I can't force, to your point, individuals or workplaces to
Mm,
become happier, even if they're clients of ours. I can't just snap my fingers. I'm not a magician in that way. I think of it more like my job is to equip people with the capacity and capability and the confidence to tend to their own happiness and
mm,
to equip organizations with the resources that they need to tend to happiness within their teams. And if I do that well, if I go, I've given you the right resources, the right skills, the right tools, the right environment, the rest is on you. And I think
mm.
that's much more valuable because it also means that we don't end up with trained dependency. I
Yeah.
see a lot of consulting and, you know, people with doing great work in the well-being space, whatever it may be, in counseling, psychotherapy, that accidentally end up with trained reliancy
Yep.
because it's like, oh, like you're feeling so much better or you're doing so much better at work because of our work. It's like, no, 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 no. Like
Yeah.
this may have got it started, this may have given you the right tools, but you're feeling this way because you're doing the work. Like it's your responsibility, your happiness or the happiness of your team.
Mm.
That's on you. I'm simply here to facilitate and to give the right tools.
I love that. And I am all for that as well. Like I don't want people to rely on myself or anyone.
Hmm.
It's about here's the tools to help you be the best you can be and understand others. But yeah, if there's that reliability, that means really for me that I've failed
Hmm.
because I don't want to be an employee for other people. I want people to be able to have that ripple effect. And I think you're exactly the same.
Yeah, huge believer in the ripple effect of this kind of work, and it's so evidence backed and shown that. I was reading a report earlier this year that was a study done in some of the Scandi countries. And they found that happiness had a measurable ripple effect of up to 3 degrees of separation, which is still wild to me, right? It means if people learn more about the skills and science of happiness and they become happier, someone listening to this podcast right now goes, I'm going to learn more about that. I'm going to learn about positive psychology. I'm going to learn about happiness in the workplace. And then their happiness goes up. It's like their colleagues, partners, best friend, right, also has a measurable increase to their happiness. And they might not even know that person. It's just
Yeah.
because when we feel better, we make better choices, we follow through with better actions. It does spread this little ripple of change throughout society. And so
Mm,
when I talk about this, the big notion that started BU Happiness College, which is how do we grow global happiness? That's a big and daunting task
mm.
until you start thinking about the ripple effect and you go, actually, someone listens to this, they
Yep.
go implement something that they learned from our conversation today.
Yep.
Not only does their life become measurably better, but they get to make a difference to the lives of others. And I get to be cheeky and count the lives of those others towards our tally of lives that we've impacted. And I might never meet them. I might never cross paths with them.
Yeah. Yes, and you can feel that too, right? Like you can feel if you are talking to you or I, or if you are going to a workplace and someone is happy versus something else, like you can feel that. And we behave differently because of that as well. We react and respond based on the gut feeling, based on the body language, based on the tone. It is so big and huge, but we just don't think about it until we have a conversation like this or we focus on it like our life's goals.
100%. And I'm sure we've all had that experience. Like people will be listening right now. And I can guarantee that if I asked you to think to a time where, as a customer or a consumer or a client, you went to purchase something from a business and the person you interacted with so visibly and clearly hated their job. Like, how did you end up feeling through that buying experience? How did you end up feeling as you left?
Mm,
Think about your likelihood to return for more business, to refer, to like, it just plummets. Compared to if I said, think of a time when you went to a business and interacted and the person so obviously was happy at work, right? Genuinely enjoyed what they did, had meaning and purpose what they did, had the right support from their leaders and managers to feel their best at work.
mm,
The environment and condition was right. How did that impact you as a buyer? Like we talk about this flow on effect, this ripple effect of happiness. It's not just on the individual scale.
mm,
From a business perspective, if you have happier employees and a happier team, the dramatically felt first impact of that, the first tier of that ripple effect, is in your customer experience.
Yes. Yes. And I've gone back to places because of that, because of the feeling.
Yeah.
And when you have the opposite impact, you visibly, you don't. I've put things down and walked out of a shop because even if it's something that I needed, because if they don't want you there, and there's no value exchange, there's no pleasantries, then yeah, you make those decisions. They're pretty big decisions.
Mm.
Mm. Now, why are we talking about happiness? How is this swept under the rug? Like, why is happiness at work taboo?
Mm. It's a good question. Yeah. And when we're talking about coming on the show and you're like, what seems to get swept under the rug at work? What do people not talk about enough? I remember saying to you, I was like, I'm probably going to go a little opposite to where a lot of people go with this and go, I think one of the least spoken about things in the workplace is happiness and the importance of happiness as the end goal and state. And the reason I say that, so it was late 2019, I started doing a lot of work with organizations to help them measure, understand, and improve happiness in the workplace. And I was getting laughed out of rooms. But then I noticed if you changed the wording from happiness to something that felt more palatable to, a corporate industry, if you used more of the workplace jargon that we're all familiar with, I said, okay, well, let's put happiness to the side for a second. Do you think it's important to focus on the well-being of your employees? And they went, oh, yes, employee well-being. We've been looking at that since the 90s. That's very important. And I went, okay, well, what about how engaged people are at work? And they went, oh, employee engagement, the go-to annual survey that we send out that barely anyone responds to. Of course, we've been measuring that since the 70s. And then I went, what about culture? And they're like, oh, newer term, culture. Yes, we're becoming more aware of culture. Very important. Let's talk about culture. I went, well, all of these things that we're now getting very interested in the workplace have the same end goal, right? The purpose of focusing on well-being, the purpose of engagement, the purpose of culture is if you do it well, it answers a fundamentally core question, which is, are your team happy at work? Yes or no? That's it. And by the way, I'll say that the importance of measuring multiple contributors to happiness at work. Happiness at work is the end destination.
Mm.
The measures that we use or the pathways that we can use to get there are things, yes, like well-being, engagement, culture, leadership, and resilience. They're the five that my team and I measure when we do our workplace happiness diagnostics.
Mhm.
And the reason it's important to look at all five, but to still keep in mind what is our end purpose of this, is I've seen workplaces, in particular industries, I've seen this happen a lot, that have really high engagement. So if you're only measuring engagement, you go, wow, we're nailing it. Then you go,
Mm.
wait, why are all of our people leaving? What's going on here? So they've got really high engagement, but their well-being is really low. Their resilience to burnout is really low. They're very prone to burnout. And these industries, I'm talking in particular the helping industries, allied health, social work, education,
Yeah.
very high degree of meaning and purpose. That lends itself well to engagement,
Mm.
but a lot of administrative burden, but often doesn't have the resourcing and support needed to support flourishing and thriving at work. So well-being suffers.
Mm.
And so if we're only looking at the question from an angle of engagement, we're only getting one part of the picture. I've described it before as imagine looking at the front of a puzzle box, but
Mm.
80% of it's covered. And you're trying to put together this whole puzzle only seeing 20% of the picture. It's really hard to do.
Mm.
And then the other reason I say it's important to remind ourselves and to just call it out as it is and have really upfront conversations like this of going, hey, happiness is the end goal, is because I think for too long we've tried to tell ourselves that the end goal of focusing on well-being, engagement, culture, good leadership, and resilience is to drive performance and productivity. And a lot of organizations and leaders have gone, the end goal, the end outcome, the destination is performance and productivity.
Mm.
But let me tell you now so clearly in no uncertain terms that you can have high performance and productivity for a short term and have it negatively impact happiness and all the things that we've spoken about. And then the end result of that is normally massively high turnover costs, high mental health costs, now more legal risk with psychosocial safety laws coming through.
Yeah.
Right? There's more costs and risk to the organization. Recruitment cost is huge. If we flip that and go, hang on, rather than focusing on performance and productivity, what if we focus on happiness? People feeling their best at work. being equipped and enabled to do their best work. What comes as a natural byproduct of that, and this is from research done by Sean Aker and his team at Harvard, they called it the happiness advantage. They found when teams were happy at work and people were happy at work, performance and productivity goes up by
Mm,
anywhere from about 12% through to 32%, depending on what resource you're looking at. They found
mm,
sales teams, happier sales teams produce 37% more sales than non-happy sales teams. And they found
mm,
all of these great benefits and outcomes to productivity and performance because we led with happiness rather than leading with productivity and performance. So the reason we
mm,
talk about this, and I go, what's not spoken enough about work? So I go, it's been right in front of us the whole time. We've almost been getting there. For about 100 years now, we've been talking about things like performance, productivity, well-being, engagement, culture, leadership, all these things. It's like we've been beating around the bush, and the core fundamental question is, are we doing the best that we can to give our team the environment, the support, and the resources to be happy at work? If you can answer yes to that wholeheartedly, I I will personally guarantee that you're going to get better outcomes than if you
mm.
say no to that.
Yes. And I wonder if having on the one-on-ones or performance reviews or KPIs or whatever, if we said, and I know your diagnostic tools is probably way more, way better than this, but imagine asking your team, are you happy?
Mm,
What would make you happier?
mm, mm.
Just the answers to those two questions could give insights into what you could do next.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, I will give a shout out to them. Not our diagnostic. You're right. We do an annual diagnostic with our partnered workplaces where we measure those five big contributing factors to happiness. They get an end happiness score. It's quite in depth. But there's another organization called Friday Pulse,
Mhm.
based over in the UK. Nick Marks is their founder. And they call it Friday Pulse because they started just sending out, I think it's one question, maybe two, but I know one of the questions that they send out, it's an automated, just little pulse check that just asks people, how did you feel about work this week overall?
Mm.
And it just has a little scale of emotions,
Yeah.
and you click which one represents you. And it goes, overall, if you were to digest, and obviously we feel a massive variety of emotions at work in a 5 day cycle.
Mm.
We're going to have moments where we feel great, moments where we feel not so great. But overall, if you look back on the last 5 days and go, how would I summarize my emotional experience of work? Where does that sit on the spectrum? Is it mostly happy? Is it anxious? Is it deflated? Is it stressed? Is it overwhelmed? Right? Whatever it may be. And so Nick and his team at Friday Pulse started going, we can pretty accurately gauge how people feel about their working week by how they're feeling when they clock out of work on a Friday.
Mm.
And then as a result of that, how they're feeling about going back to work on the Monday. We've all heard of the Sunday scaries.
Yeah.
Right? And so there are organizations through Friday Pulse and obviously through our more in-depth one that we do once a year. I think they work really well together as a pulse check versus a deep diagnostic. There are
Mm.
organizations that are going, we will measure this and we will ask those questions in a safe, genuinely anonymous to the point of psychosocial safety. Not like staring down your boss and be like, oh no, I love it here. I'm super happy. Please don't fire me if I told you that I'm so stressed, right? This safe space where it's like that your boss can't see the raw data. We can actually make it so you can be honest about how you're feeling at work. Yeah, there are organizations doing that now, and it's leading to some fantastic insights.
Yeah. And we do, so we have a diagnostic as well for risk assessments, and we do it anonymously as well because it's not about the he said, she said.
Correct.
It's not about the things, it's about the outcomes that you're getting and the causes for these things. So when it comes to happiness, if a
Mm,
workplace or let's say a leader has never heard of this before, or this is something new to them,
yeah.
what are maybe some of the elements or what are the things that they can do to check in or help to create that happiness culture within their team?
Yeah, so I think it has to start with self. And what I mean by that is we need more leaders who fundamentally question their idea of what happiness is. 'Cause a lot of us end up in this trap where we think happiness is just this fleeting feeling.
Mm.
And normally, in Western individualized capitalistic societies, we think happiness is a fleeting feeling that comes after some form of success or performance.
Yes.
It's the classic, I'll be happy when I get the promotion, when I complete this job, when I get the pay rise, whatever it may be. We're always chasing happiness. That's not what happiness is. When we look at the happiness science and the happiness research, it's much healthier to think of happiness almost like an emotional umbrella term.
Mm-hmm.
And under that umbrella are all these feelings like joy, pride, contentment, connection, contribution, meaning, purpose, right? Validation, all these different feelings that sit under it that are quite pleasurable and joyful. The reason I highlight that is, look, I'm an optimist when it comes to the importance of happiness at work, but I'm also in many ways a realist. And I know that we're not going to feel, if we just think of happiness as joy or pleasure, we are
Mm.
not going to feel that every day at work. It's just not going to happen. There are going to be days that are way more challenging than others. And if I said to you, go find joy in them, you're going to roll your eyes and be like, this guy's an idiot. But if I said, hey, can you find a sense of meaning in those challenging days? Can you find a moment of connection in those challenging days? Can you find a point of pride in those challenging moments, right?
Mm.
It encourages us to become happiness seekers in a way of happiness is always present in some form, even in some of our most challenging endeavors in life. I was talking recently to someone about grief and
Mm.
how grief is an experience that's so categorized, yes, by feelings of sadness and hurt and heartache and loss, but also of feelings of deep love.
Mm.
And love is an expression of happiness, right? It's still there. It's just wrapped around all these other emotions. And that's beautiful, right? We're emotionally complex creatures. So I'd
Mm.
encourage you to start with go, happiness is more than just pleasure. And it's not the outcome of success. It's this emotionally complex construct that we can try to find even in really difficult moments. So that's
Mm.
super important, right? That's the first thing we need to think about. From there, we then need to define what happiness looks like in the workplace and what facilitates
Mm.
us being able to find those expressions of happiness.
Yeah.
Now, I mentioned them before. I'll mention them again nice and clear for everyone taking notes. I did my master's thesis research on this. I dove into how is happiness actually defined and measured in a workplace setting.
Mm-hmm.
And the big overarching five were well-being, engagement, culture, leadership, and resilience. The resilience being the ability to adapt to change and challenge without burnout. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at those five measures, you're going to, we mentioned before the idea of seeing a puzzle box, only 20% of it. If you see all five of those clearly, you're going to see a lot more of that puzzle box for building a happy and thriving workforce.
Yeah.
How we do that? Three things that I talk about really clearly. So, first two that we just mentioned there, and then I'll talk about the three to do following. So, first one, redefine happiness.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Recognize it is emotionally complex and seek it out and encourage that in yourself and in your team. Look for moments of happiness. All right, second one, understand the main contributors to happiness, those five pillars.
Yep.
From there, we need to do three things really clearly. We need to measure it
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much truth to saying what is measured is managed. And again, I'm an optimist when it comes to the happiness research, but I'm also a realist. I've consulted for and spoken in front of accountants and CFOs and COOs and people who go, this all sounds a bit wishy-washy and woo-woo, show me the hard data and the science.
Yeah.
And I love those people. They're my kind of people. Let's do that. Let's go there, right? So I understand the critical importance of being able to go, this is what we can see. When we talk about measuring things like well-being, engagement, culture, leadership, resilience, and overarching happiness, the best tool we have available at the moment is anonymized surveys. It's not perfect, but it's the best that we've got, right?
Mm-hmm.
Until we have some terrifying Black Mirror futuristic way to tap directly into people's levels of serotonin and oxytocin in their bloodstream while they're at work, which I'm not recommending. I think that's going to be a terrible future, right? We don't want that. So the best we
Yeah.
have at the moment is to ask people about their subjective experience of work
Yeah.
and to follow that process all the way through. Like I was talking to someone recently and he said people aren't sick of surveys, they're sick of doing shit surveys.
Yeah.
Right? There's no such thing as survey fatigue. If people genuinely believe the survey is going to make a difference, if they feel heard and validated, and if the insights are acted upon,
Yes.
your people will take surveys any day of the week,
Mm-hmm.
right? So make sure the survey process isn't done when you get the data back. That starts when you get the data back, right? You've then got to follow through and provide consultation and say, this is what we found, and let's do some focus groups to dive a bit further, and let's do these actions. So we need to measure it. Measure really important. Right. Second thing we need to do is invest in learning and development, specifically into what we call humanistic skills. They used to be called soft skills, for
Mm-hmm.
everyone who's familiar with them. So this is the idea of most of our education system is built around technical skills to make you a good employee, not the
Mm.
humanistic skills that make you a good human being.
Yeah.
Interestingly, though, thanks to AI and machine learning and a rise of technology, the skills that are becoming frequently more and more in demand by workplaces are humanistic skills like empathy, communication, emotional intelligence. Right? So, working on and learning those skills is critically important. And so, I often say to leaders, after you're measuring happiness, invest in the skills that we know increase happiness. Invest in helping your people learn emotional intelligence, in learning how to be good communicators, in
Mm,
learning empathy and compassion, and building these skills, particularly at a leadership level.
yeah.
Right? If we can do that, that's going to create bottom up change. If we have
Mm,
a vastly higher skilled workforce and humanistic skills, change will start to flow through. And then the final step, so we're now measuring these pillars of happiness, we're investing into people learning about them and learning the skills that support them. The final step is to be bold enough and brave enough to commit to top down change.
mm,
What I mean by that is being bold enough and brave enough to look at the systemic contributors to unhappiness.
yeah.
I'm really tired of seeing organizations say that burnout is just an individual problem to solve, and that if
Mm,
people learn about burnout prevention, they're going to feel better. But
mm,
really, the workload and the systems and structures they're using are causing that burnout. I'm getting really tired of organizations saying that they're committed to fostering mentally healthy workplaces every mental health month and every Are You OK day, but every other time of the year, they're doing nothing about it.
yeah.
And so I cannot stress enough that yes, we want to measure it and do something with those results. Yes, we need to invest in learning and development initiatives to support people learning these skills. But if you just stop there, I think it leads to some really negative outcomes. And it's, to be honest, it's led to a lot of what we're seeing in society now. We need more leaders and more organizations who are bold enough and brave enough to stand up and say, we can do better from the top down,
Hmm.
and we're committing to doing better from the top down and looking at the systems that have created these challenges people have with their work.
Yeah. Yeah, because mental health and well-being is impacted so hugely by leadership, by systems, by the culture,
Yeah.
by what is psychosocial safety. So to improve that, that's not an individual choice. Yes, and I love what you said earlier. I'm all about that as well. We need to come to the party. We are responsible for what we do and who we are and how we respond and react. But when it's you've got 1,000 angry customers in front of you and it's because the system's down or, something that's completely out of our control, happiness will go in the toilet because there's nothing we physically as an individual can control or do about improving the happiness of the other person in front of us. So if there was one tip you could leave employers with on that top down, one thing you would like them to do or know, what would that be?
Remind yourself why you got into your industry and workplace in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, I fundamentally believe that most people, the vast majority, I'm going to go as far as to say 99.5% of Earth's population, does not wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to ruin someone's day today.
Mm.
I just don't believe people go to work intentionally wanting to make work or life harder for anyone else.
Yeah.
I think we end up there accidentally sometimes.
Yeah.
We end up there due to misaligned priorities. We end up there due to under-skilled and under-resourced leaders and teams. We end up there because we've got technically great leaders who haven't built humanistic skills. There's all these things that can lead to that. But I fundamentally don't believe people get into a leadership position to make other people's life worse.
Yeah.
But we lose sight of that sometimes. The amount of leaders I speak to that are just so focused on, and again, part of this is the system.
Mm.
You know, we're in an environment where CEOs and organizations are held accountable to quarterly performance reports and profit reports, but real meaningful change and impact takes longer than 12 weeks.
Yeah.
And so we need leaders to, first big tip, remind yourself why you're going to your workplace in the first place. Because
Mm.
I would endeavor to guess that there's some point where you went, I'm doing this because I think it makes someone else's life a bit better in
Yes.
any industry, right? So stay connected to that. Don't lose sight of that. And second thing, be willing to think long term. Like I do mean that we are in an industry, so we're in a society at the moment where organizational leaders are focused on quarterly returns. Our politicians are focused on 3 to 4 year election cycles. we need more leaders to go, I'm actually looking at the impact that I'm going to make over the next 20 years of my career.
Yeah.
I'm looking at how I'm going to leave my workplace, my colleagues, my industry, and maybe society
Mm,
a little bit better than it was before I started.
mm,
If you can stay connected to those things, why are you going to the industry in the first place? And going, you know what, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm willing to commit to happiness and thriving and flourishing workplaces over the long term and know that that takes time.
mhm.
They're going to be your best starting points and strongest stepping stones.
Yeah. How are you impacting the next generation? How is your ripple effect
Yeah.
impacting the next generation? And that's hilarious because it comes all the way back to where we were started. And last week I did a training session where exactly that came up.
Mm.
And they're talking about, you know, we're measured on these KPIs, but psychosocial safety and happiness isn't that.
Yeah.
There's so much more involved in that. And
Mm.
I said exactly like your comment as well. People who are happy don't normally go around harming others. And most people don't mean to come to the workplace to do that. It's a values clash, it's miscommunication, it's misunderstanding, it's these things that we just let happen and drop and not actually have that conversation to say, oh, hey, Declan, I feel like maybe what I just said was heard differently. This is what I meant. What did you hear? Because I feel like, you know, your body language is telling me that I've put my foot in my mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it lends itself to compassion, right?
Yeah.
Towards ourselves, towards others, to
Yes.
look, I don't know if I can say this with 100% conviction true, but I can tell people that my life has been a lot better since I started telling myself this was true. So maybe it's just like hopeful delusion. But my life is notably better since I've started assuming that people have positive intentions and sometimes really shitty strategies to get to those intentions.
Yes.
Right? If I allow other people the grace and compassion and myself the grace and compassion to go, we're all doing life for the first time. We're all
Yeah.
trying to do good things and be better. It's just sometimes our way of meeting those positive intentions isn't great.
Mm,
If I can meet other people with that understanding, that empathy, and that compassion, again, I don't know if it's 100% true. I can't speak for 8 billion people on the planet, but my life is notably better since
yes.
I've started believing that.
Yeah. And that ripple, you treating others that way, giving them a break, giving them the benefit of the doubt, means that they will feel that and feel better about it and change. I've seen people change. Like um, John Toomey said at the last summit that we were at, respect changes people, not conflict. You might want to go up to someone and give them a piece of your mind because they did the wrong thing. But that ripple effect is much more harmful than saying, hey, mate, are you okay?
Yeah. And on that note, like I will highlight here, this doesn't mean I'm some sort of Buddhist monk saint who never judges. I think the distinction and separation is I try to judge the behavior, not the person.
Yes.
Right? So instead of categorizing someone as like, wow, they're a real asshole, I go, no, they're showing some asshole tendencies. Right? Like they're behaving in some ways like a bit of an asshole, and the behavior is an issue that we need to address.
Yes.
But the person themselves, right? I cannot categorize them as that entirely. I don't know them outside of this context. I don't know them at home,
Yes.
right? And so if we address, like, I think it's still important to not overswing and go, everyone has positive intentions, so everything's okay, nothing needs to be addressed. No, there are hard conversations that need to be had,
Yes.
but focus them towards the behavior, not the person.
Yeah. I love that, Declan. And look, I think we definitely need a part two or maybe even a part three because I'm so excited that you're going to be involved in the 2025 Psychosocial Safety Summit, which is held on the International Day of Happiness,
It
which is
is. Yes.
funny. And of course, you're booked. So unfortunately, you won't be there with us live this time. However, you're going to be doing a workshop on the happiness formula the week or two after. So Monday, the 31st of March. I'm really looking forward to that. But if people can't wait for that to meet you there or for the next podcast that we do, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
All the socials. So if you search that happiness guy or Declan Edwards, you'll find me on LinkedIn, Instagram. As of recently, because my 14-year-old brother told me I'm not cool unless I'm on TikTok, you'll now
Okay.
find me on TikTok where I'm apparently cooler. Um, and if you love listening to my voice and finding out more about if podcasts are your thing, which I assume they are if you're listening to a podcast right now, you can find my podcast, which is called How to Be Happy. We do two shows on there, How to Be Happy and How to Be Happy at Work,
Mm,
where we talk about the skills and science of happiness. So you can learn much more by going on a deep dive rabbit hole over on the How to Be Happy podcast.
I love that. And I will share the links in the show notes as well so people can get that. But look, thank you so much for sharing your insights, Declan. I cannot wait to meet you in person when we finally do that. And for anyone listening, if you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe and share it. We'll see you next time on Under the Rug at Work, where we continue to shine light on issues that are too often overlooked.